In today's video, I want to show you a book that explains how you can take photos and create quilts with them. Hi, I'm Jamieson-Hirst of Chatterbox Quilts, and today I'm taking a look at Stitched Photo Mosaic Quilting, a unique grid technique for piecing images into beautiful quilts. It's published by Landar Publishing, and it's written by Timna Tarr. Now, I had heard about this book from one of my guild members because she was so excited about this technique, and so I actually got this book recently, and it is quite interesting and very detailed. Now, let's start at the beginning, shall we? This is the first project she made. She wanted to take this photo of her niece and create a quilt with it. So she developed this system, and it's like a grid. So it looks like a mosaic, right? Because she's cutting little squares. There's a little bit more than that going on with it. However, there are some really interesting results when you use this technique. Now, she has lots of different examples in the book. You can see Daisy the Corgi here, but of course my favorite one is I woke up like this because I can kind of relate to this some days. And you can see that there's all kinds of different patterns in these little squares that make up the background and even interface in that. So it's not solid fabric she's using in these. It's patterned fabrics, which is really interesting. But you know, if you cut them up small enough, which you're doing in this process, you really can't see what is on that fabric. You just see the predominant color of that fabric. So it works very well for this technique. Now, she tells you how to use this book. Now, do you read these? I mean, a lot of us don't, but maybe we should, okay? Because she explains the steps you're going to go through and the process that she explains in the book. And she's also saying this is a guidebook for you, okay? Yes, there are projects in here that you can make, but really she wants you to learn this technique so you can take your own photos and create your own personal quilts. And there's no place to start than at the beginning. So at the beginning, getting started in chapter 1, she explains the different tools you're going to need for this technique, most of which you probably already have in your studio. So it's nothing very fancy here. She does use freezer paper in her projects here, so she'll explain how to do that. But otherwise, you know, your liquid starch, cotton batting, glue stick, all these types of things that we usually have. Now, when you go through, there's lots of interesting information about how to do this, but there's also some other kind of tips that I'll point out as we go along that you wouldn't necessarily expect to find in this book, but are very helpful. So let's continue on and see some of the other projects. Of course, you're going to be making these quilts based on a photo. So she's telling you what kinds of photos will make good quilts, because there is some differences, and she'll give you ideas here and examples, I should say, to tell you or explain to you, because it's hard to explain in text. It's easier if you can look at photos and go, okay, that one's not going to work as well, and this is why. This one works better, and this is why. So she goes through and explains that to you, okay? Here's one of these tips I was telling you about. So she has a tip here, and you'll see them in these little blue boxes. And she's telling you don't need a fancy camera to take those photos. She uses her iPhone to do these photos, okay? And she explains why that is as she goes along. So those little tip boxes are really helpful, kind of an extra information on this process as you go along. Now, you saw that those little squares were in a grid. So you're actually going to take your photo once you've selected your photo, and you're going to mark it up into a grid. Okay, that's your first thing you're going to do. And so again, you've got all these examples. There's no shortage of diagrams and photos in this book, so it's really easy to understand this technique, so you'll be successful at it, right? Then she gets into color and fabric choices. Remember I talked about how she's using patterned fabric in here, so she's going to go through and explain that, and she goes into color in great detail. Okay, we all know the color wheel, but she's talking about different color schemes, how they're going to work. She talks about value, you know, where value is so important, right? We also always think that it's the different colors you need. Yes, you need that, but you need to have that contrast in those colors, the lights and the darks. If you have everything sort of just medium, not nearly as effective. And I think that's something a lot of us struggle with. So there's a lot of information about gaining color confidence in this book. Then she gets into the basic construction technique, and she's talking about a specific project here, the Blue Daisy. So she tells you all these different ways that you're going to make that, or all the different steps, I should say, in making that, again with those little squares. And you're going to be making some templates, because when you look at this, Yes, there's this kind of grid going on, but you've got these kind of, these rounded shapes. How does that work? Well, you're going to make a little template for that actually. And she gives you step-by-step photo instructions on how to do that. So she's actually going to be preparing different pieces just in that one little square to get that curve in there. So you can see how she's doing this. And she's also showing you how she finishes those edges off, because you're going to have to do that because it's applique, right? So she's using a blanket stitch. Again, step-by-step photos. Really, really helpful. You can also do it with a zigzag stitch. You can also do it with a straight stitch. There are different ways to finish off applique edges, and she's showing you different ways to do that. She's also showing you if you have some of these squares that have several different pieces in them. So, I can't overemphasize how much step-by-step explanation there is in this book and how helpful that is. Because when you first look at it, you're thinking, how am I going to do this? All you have to do is follow her instructions. So you can see here as you move along, and she's finishing the quilt off, and she tells you about things to think about here as you go through making these projects, okay? She also gives you helpful tips for tricky elements. So, as you go through, you might run into some parts in your project that are a little different than what she's shown so far. So she's giving you some suggestions on how to go through that and be successful. Because remember, this is a guidebook and you're going to be working on your own photos. So she can't give you step-by-step instructions on your own photo, but she's covering pretty much, I would say, everything you need that you could take any photo you have and be successful with it. She has a whole chapter on troubleshooting tips and tricks so that you won't get stuck anywhere along the way. And even though this is, taking photos and making quilts with them, there's a lot of really helpful information in here if you're doing hand applique. Like, for example, turning curved edges, something a lot of us will struggle with in that technique. Again, up close and detailed photos so that you can solve that issue. Now remember, I talked to you about these little tip boxes that she has in here. And here's one here, she calls it tension headaches, okay? And you can see this person looking like, oh my goodness, but actually she's talking about thread tension on your machine. So if you're having problems as you go along, she's got different suggestions where to start to move through different ideas that may resolve that issue for you. So again, not anything necessarily to do with the technique, but kind of a general, very helpful information for when you're working with your sewing machine. Then we get into the projects, all right? So let me just go back here because I almost skipped the first one here, which is Cheeky Cat. Okay, gotta have a cat project, right? And if I was doing this technique, I would definitely be making one of the cats. Maybe not Salem because she's just so black, but some of the other ones that have stripes in them. So, like this cat has the black and white contrast, which is really nice. So these are small. This is only 17 inches square. Here's what she started with, okay? She shows you the different fabric she picked out, and you can kind of see how that's going to come together with that pink background, the black and white, of course, for the cat. You can see some details here with hand embroidery, or you could do those with your sewing machine as well. And then she even has quilting suggestions too on these projects. Then we have Charming Chicken. Okay, I'm not a fan of chickens, I must say, but in these projects they are kind of interesting, aren't they? I especially like her choice of the background color there because it really makes that chicken pop off of it. So again, you can see all this information that she has here up close, showing you the grid where she has prepared all her fabric pieces, or so she can prepare, I should say, her fabric pieces. And then even going into the detail in the eye, because the eye, if you look back here, and she has a lot of animals that she does, right? But look at that eye. I mean, it looks really realistic. You're going, how does she get that? That little white part is actually hand embroidered, okay? And it makes it very, very realistic. And then Dashing Dog, okay? Another one that's this one's a bit bigger, 32 inches by 25, but they're just very effective, really cute. And you don't have to have anything very complex in the middle, right? She's only got part of the dog, just the face, as you can see, just part of the chicken, part of the cat. So it doesn't have to be the whole thing, which would have to be a bigger project, I would say, because you don't want to get too tiny with those squares, right? They're small enough. Flowers are also a really good place to start with this particular technique. Bearded iris, okay, here. And you can see that background with the yellow popping, the purple just pops right off that. And I love this fabric here. She's used this graduated fabric here that she's used with this gradient going on. That's really effective. It looks like there's a light shining on this particular quilt. And here you can see what she started with. It's always interesting to see the photos that she started with. And then you can see what they became when you put them into that fabric. At the end, she has quilting and finishing. So she gives you ideas about quilting, different things you can consider there when you're doing it. Also binding as well. Great detailed binding technique. And then at the back of the book, she has the templates for the different projects here. So these templates here, you can make them a bit bigger if you want. You can make them smaller. She tells you what size you need to enlarge them for the projects in the book for that size of project. So you do need to enlarge these if you wanted to make them. So you could take them to a print shop and get them to enlarge them for you. She actually has information on how to do that specifically when you go to the shop, which is very helpful. You can also see in these projects, because all the squares are numbered, so you don't get them out of order, right? She's got all those numbers in there for you. And here's an extra one here, a rhubarb leaf. That might be the one you want to start with because it's very simple. So if you're interested in taking your photos and translating them into quilts, I would suggest you take a look at Stitched Photo Mosaic Quilting by Timna Tarr. And if you look up above or in the description below, I've put a link to this book so you can check it out and get your own copy. Thanks so much for watching today. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to share it with your quilting friends. And remember to subscribe and hit the bell so you'll be notified the next time I release a new video. And before you go, check out these other videos that I've included just for you. For more helpful quilting information, be sure to go to my website at www.chatterboxquilts.com.